Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that I think you're going to find pretty fascinating.
Yeah, this one is definitely powerful.
We're going deep into Psalm 35.
That's right, Psalm 35.
Which, on the surface, you might not think, oh, this is going to be a fun one.
Right.
But it is packed with emotion. And it gives us a window into how even someone like King David dealt with some really difficult stuff.
What's so gripping about Psalm 35 is it's a prayer fired in the kiln of hardship. David isn't giving us like a theology lecture here. He's bearing his soul in the midst of feeling totally betrayed.
Yeah, it's like we're reading his diary.
Yes.
During one of the worst periods of his life.
Absolutely.
And what I find so interesting is that he doesn't shy away from asking God for some serious intervention. Mm-hmm. He doesn't just want comfort.
Right.
He wants God to step onto the battlefield, shield and spear in hand.
That's right. And those vivid descriptions aren't just poetic flourish, They tap into the ancient world's understanding of God as a divine warrior.
Right.
Which would have resonated with David's audience.
For sure.
It reveals a faith that even when it was shaken, believed that God has the power to throw down against injustice.
Totally. Like he's picturing God as his ultimate backup.
Yeah.
Ready to fight alongside him.
Yeah.
But what makes this even more intense, I think, is how David contrasts this warrior image with the actions of his enemies.
Yeah.
These aren't just random foes.
Right.
These are people that he showed kindness to in the past.
Right.
And now they're setting traps for him, waiting for him to fall.
Yeah.
That's got to sting more than just being attacked by a stranger.
Absolutely. And that sting is amplified when we consider David's position as king.
Right.
He's not just dealing with personal betrayal, but this is a violation of the covenant bond.
Wow.
The loyalty expected between a leader and his people.
It's huge.
It's a breach of trust that undermines the very fabric of his kingdom.
Okay, so we've got betrayal from people he trusted.
Yeah.
On a level that impacts his entire nation.
That's right.
No wonder this prayer is so emotionally charged.
Yes.
And he does not hold back in describing how his enemies are behaving.
No, he doesn't.
They're practically throwing parties.
Yeah.
Celebrating his misfortunes.
Yeah.
Which honestly just sounds messed up.
It's a stark portrait of human nature's darker side, isn't it?
Yeah.
This gleeful schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, I love that word.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
It reveals a deep-seated malice that goes beyond just personal disagreement.
Yeah.
And for David, this isn't just about his own pain. It's about a broader sense of justice being violated.
And that's where I think his repeated question, how long, O Lord, comes in.
Yes.
He's not just asking for personal rescue.
Right.
He's pleading with God to step in and stop the spread of this kind of toxic behavior.
Yeah. It's a question we still ask today when faced with seemingly endless injustice.
Oh, for sure.
It's a cry for understanding, A plea for God to make sense of a world that seems to have gone off the rails.
100%.
And yet, even in the midst of this raw anguish, David's prayer takes a turn.
Yeah.
He doesn't descend into despair.
Right.
He clings to his faith.
This is where it gets really interesting to me.
Okay.
Because up until now, it's been all about vindication, about God coming in with force.
Right.
But suddenly, David shifts gears.
Yeah.
It's like he finds this inner well of confidence that even if things look bleak right now, God will eventually set things right.
Exactly. In verses 22 to 25.
Okay.
David affirms his trust in God's justice, declaring with absolute certainty that God will awaken to defend his cause.
Wow.
It's not a passive resignation.
Right.
It's a defiant declaration of faith.
Powerful.
Imagine being in David's shoes for a moment, surrounded by enemies, feeling betrayed and deeply hurt.
That's rough.
Yet he chooses to hold on to the belief that ultimately God is in control.
Yeah. That's a powerful choice, especially when everything around him seems to be falling apart.
It is.
And what's even more fascinating is that this newfound confidence leads to a tangible shift in his prayer.
Yeah.
It's like he can almost see the light at the end of the tunnel.
You're right. The tone shifts from despair to anticipation. David envisions his vindication, the shame of his enemies, and his own joyful praise to God.
Wow.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, we can choose to hold on to hope and trust in a power greater than ourselves.
This is a good point for us to pause because I think what we've uncovered so far is just how multi-layered this psalm is.
Yeah.
It's raw. It's honest.
It is.
It's a glimpse into both the darkest corners of human behavior
right.
and the incredible resilience of faith.
That's good.
Before we move on to unpack even more.
I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Psalm 5 isn't just an ancient poem,
Right.
It's a mirror reflecting timeless struggles and the enduring power of faith to navigate them.
All right, then, let's take a breather. And when we come back, we'll dive into how this anticipated victory David speaks of is about so much more than just winning against his enemies.
Okay.
There's a deeper purpose at play here.
I'm ready.
And I can't wait to explore that with you.
Awesome.
See you in a bit.
All right.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but my mind is still kind of swirling with all the raw emotion and vivid imagery in this psalm.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it's hard not to get caught up in David's pain and anger.
It's certainly a powerful testament to the complexities of the human experience. But as we were saying before, there's more to David's anticipated triumph than just a personal victory over his enemies.
Right. It's not just like David, one enemy, zero, end of story.
Right.
He seems to be looking ahead to something much bigger.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If we look closely at verses 26-28,
okay,
we see that David's desire for vindication isn't driven by like a thirst for revenge or a need to prove himself.
So what's driving him then? Because he's clearly longing for something to shift.
Well, he talks about those who desire his vindication shouting for joy and praising God.
Okay.
This points to a communal celebration of justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a solitary victory. It's a shared experience of relief and restoration.
Okay, so he's not just fighting for himself.
Right.
He's fighting for the well-being of his people.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying, if I'm vindicated, it means God is upholding justice for everyone, not just the king.
Exactly. And when he says God wants his servant to be secure,
right,
it goes beyond David's personal safety.
Okay.
This statement has echoes of the covenant relationship we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's almost like a public affirmation of God's commitment to protecting those who are faithful to him, regardless of their position or status.
Wow, that adds a whole other layer to this.
Yeah.
Because if you're one of David's subjects listening to this psalm, you're not just hearing about a king battling his rivals.
Right.
You're hearing about God's promise to defend you as well.
That's a really insightful point. You're right. It would have had a very personal resonance for the original audience.
Wow.
And notice how David ends the psalm.
Okay.
He says, "Then I will tell others about your justice and praise you all day long." Mm-hmm. This isn't just a private sigh of relief.
Right.
It's a commitment to public proclamation.
It's like he's saying, this whole ordeal isn't just about me getting through it.
Yeah.
It's about showcasing God's faithfulness to the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's about giving testimony to how God operates even in the messy, painful stuff.
That's a brilliant way to put it. It's not just about enduring hardship.
Yeah.
It's about allowing that experience to shape us.
Right.
To become a testament to God's power and grace.
It's beautiful.
David isn't just asking to be rescued.
Yeah.
He's asking to be used as a vessel to reveal God's character to the world.
This gets me thinking, we've talked about David's pleas for justice.
Yeah.
But there's another huge theme in the Christian faith that seems absent here.
Okay.
Forgiveness.
Yeah.
Where does that fit into a psalm that feels so focused on vindication?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It feels like a big one.
And it takes us right to the heart of what it means to live out faith in a world where bad things happen.
Because on the one hand, we have David pouring out his anger and pain, begging God to expose the wrongdoing of his enemies.
Yes.
That's a pretty raw human response to betrayal.
Absolutely. It's a natural instinct to want justice when we've been wronged.
Uh-huh.
We want the perpetrators to be held accountable for their actions.
But then as followers of Jesus,
yes,
we're also called to love our enemies.
Right.
To forgive those who hurt us.
Right.
And that can feel like a huge ask.
Yeah.
Especially when the wounds are still fresh.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
This tension between our innate desire for justice and this radical call to forgiveness.
So how do we reconcile these two seemingly opposing ideas?
Yeah, that's the question.
I'm stumped, to be honest.
Yeah.
How do we hold on to the pain of betrayal and extend forgiveness?
Yeah.
It feels like those two things are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
You've hit on a profound struggle, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
But maybe the first step is remembering that forgiveness doesn't mean condoning or minimizing the offense. It's not about saying, oh, it's okay what you did.
So it's not about letting the offender off the hook.
Exactly. Forgiveness at its core is about releasing ourselves from the grip of anger and resentment.
Okay.
It's a gift we give ourselves.
Wow.
A way of breaking free from those chains of bitterness that can poison our hearts and minds.
That makes sense. But if I'm being honest, it still feels really difficult to grasp.
Sure.
Like, how do you just decide to forgive someone who's caused you immense pain?
You're right. It's not a one-time decision.
Oh.
It's a process.
Okay.
A journey that often involves acknowledging the depth of our pain, allowing ourselves to grieve the loss of trust,
right,
and ultimately choosing to surrender the situation and the offender to God's hands.
Surrender, that's a powerful word.
Yeah.
Because it implies that we're acknowledging that we're not in control of the outcome. Mm-hmm. That ultimately it's God who brings true justice.
Precisely. And by choosing to forgive, we're not dismissing the wrong.
Okay.
We're acknowledging that God is the ultimate judge.
That takes a huge weight off our shoulders.
Yeah.
It frees us to focus on our own healing and growth.
Right.
Instead of being consumed by anger or the need for revenge.
Absolutely. Forgiveness allows us to move forward, not unburdened by the past, but no longer defined by it.
That's powerful.
And that's a truth that resonates far beyond the pages of Psalm 35.
You know, it's interesting. We started this deep dive talking about David's powerful imagery.
Yeah.
His raw pleas for divine intervention.
Right.
But now we're delving into this incredibly personal and challenging concept of forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's like peeling back layers of an onion. Each layer reveals something new and profound.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And as we continue to peel back these layers, there's one more question I think we need to grapple with.
Okay.
It's something that's been lingering in the background of this whole discussion.
All right.
We've talked about David's pain, his longing for justice, and this call to forgiveness.
Right.
But what about the enemies themselves?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is there any room for redemption in their story?
Okay, you've definitely thrown a curveball in here.
Oh, no, it's a tough one.
That's a question we'll have to tackle after a short break.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. Just get into the good stuff. All right, we're back, and I have to say that question you left us with, it's really stuck with me.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in David's perspective, to sympathize with his pain and his desire for justice.
Right.
But what about those on the other side of this conflict?
Yeah.
Is there any hope for reconciliation, redemption?
It's a question that pushes us beyond the immediate narrative of Psalm 35. And it forces us to grapple with the complexities of human nature and the boundless reach of God's grace.
Yeah, because, let's be honest, it's tempting to just write off David's enemies as simply the bad guys.
Right.
To see them as purely malicious figures deserving of whatever punishment comes their way.
That's a natural human response, especially when we're empathizing with the victim.
Yeah.
But I think Psalm 35, even in its raw intensity, hints at a deeper truth about the human condition.
You're saying there's more to these enemies than meets the eye.
Consider this. David himself acknowledges that he once showed kindness to these very people who are now plotting against him.
Okay.
This suggests that at some point they weren't driven solely by malice. Something shifted, something broke in their relationship.
So are you suggesting that perhaps they were hurt or betrayed by David in some way?
It's a possibility that maybe their animosity stems from a past wound.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It doesn't excuse their actions, but it adds a layer of complexity to the situation.
This reminds me of that saying, everyone's fighting a battle we know nothing about.
Right.
It's a good reminder to approach even those we perceive as enemies with the degree of empathy and understanding.
Exactly. And I think that's where the concept of redemption becomes so crucial. Even in the midst of their wrongdoing, even in their darkest moments, these individuals are still capable of change.
Yeah.
They are still objects of God's love and grace.
So while David is crying out for justice, God might be looking at these same individuals with a heart full of compassion.
Yes.
Hoping they'll turn away from their destructive path.
It's a beautiful thought, isn't it?
It is.
That even as God upholds justice, he's also extending a hand of mercy and reconciliation.
And who knows? Perhaps David's ultimate vindication would include seeing his enemies repent and find restoration.
That's a beautiful thought.
Wow, that adds a whole new dimension to the idea of victory.
Right.
It's not just about defeating your opponents. It's about seeing them transformed, brought back into right relationship with God and with others.
It's a vision of victory that aligns with the heart of the gospel,
Right.
A message that proclaims hope and redemption for even the most lost and broken among us.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from unpacking David's raw emotion to exploring the complexities of justice and forgiveness.
Yeah.
And now we're contemplating the possibility of redemption for even those who seem most deserving of condemnation.
That's right. It's a testament to the richness and depth of Psalm 75.
Yeah.
A psalm that continues to challenge and inspire us centuries after it was written.
So as we wrap up, I'm left with this lingering question. How can we, like David, hold on to the pain of betrayal while also remaining open to the possibility of reconciliation?
It's a lifelong journey, isn't it?
It is.
One that requires us to lean into God's grace, to cultivate empathy, even for those who have wronged us.
Yeah.
And to trust that ultimately He is working to bring about healing and wholeness both for ourselves and for those who have strayed from His path.
It's a challenging message.
It is.
But one filled with hope. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder this psalm and its implications for your own life.
Great.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Psalm 35.
Appreciate it.
We hope it sparks some new insights and perhaps even a bit of soul searching.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep seeking truth.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions. And keep diving deep into the mysteries of faith.